take a look at each of these montages. Each one of these edits are made from different editors with different styles. We're talking about people like Rework, Telly, and even our fellow Inconnu member Trapocrafter. But the one concept that you see in each of these videos that is exactly the same are these pop-outs. Eye-catching, engaging, and unique. This could even be considered an essential when making your montage. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Silicon, these pop-outs look so hard to edit. But in this video, I'll teach you how to make any one of these pop-outs in a matter of minutes. If you find this video helpful, make sure to subscribe and drop a like, as I might make more of these in the near future. Anyways, let's get right into it. Alright, so we're here in After Effects. The version I'm using today is After Effects CC 2021. Now, of course, any version works. This is just the one I'm going to be using today. Alright, so yeah, let's get right into it. So first of all, I'm obviously going to make a new composition. For me, I'm going to keep it 1920 by 1080 with a 60 FPS frame rate. Here are my motion blur settings if you want. Obviously, this is all up to your preference. There's no mandatory things in here. Alright, so now that we've got our composition down, I'm just gonna slap random clip on here. Now, of course, since this is a tutorial, I'm not going to put a lot of effort into where I'm gonna put this. But of course, for your edit, you'll probably want to take more time into doing this. So I've got my clip set up right here, and I'm just going to cut it now by pressing Ctrl-Shift-D on the start. And I'm gonna give it, say, 3 seconds. I'm gonna press Ctrl-Shift-D again, so that we've cut down our clip. Alright, so let's get our pop-out going. So let's say I found my area where I want to do my pop-out. I'm just gonna quickly do numpad star on the parts that I want it to go in and out from. And after that, I'm just gonna go to my clip right here, and I'm going to press Ctrl-Shift-D this time for both sides again. And now we've got our section laid out for our pop-out. So what I'm going to do first is put a null over here. I'm gonna press Ctrl-Shift-D and cut it again so that it's the same length as our pop-out in and out section. And the reason why we use a null instead of using the position settings is because there might be already some existing position and scale keyframes, and we don't want to really interfere with that. So I'm just going to parent my clip to the null here, and that should be all you'll need. Of course, because this is a tutorial, I don't actually have any keyframes over here, but in your edit, you may have them, so that's why I have this null here. So now that we have our clip parented to the null, we can actually start animating now. So press the timer button on the scale to start the keyframe. I'm gonna move it up to maybe 20 frames. I'm gonna scale down to maybe 69. Go a little further, press the keyframe button again, and on our out marker, we're gonna bring it back to 100. Now, obviously, you can't see that. That's because it's already moved on to the next clip. But you have to trust me on the fact that this goes to 100. So technically, this is all we really need to animate a pop-out. However, if you look at the preview, it looks really choppy. There's not a lot of stuff going on. It just goes in and out. And the animation's really linear. So we're going to quickly fix that. So select all your keyframes, press F9 to turn on Easy Ease. And we're going to go quickly into the graph editor. Now, if you don't know what the graph editor is, just a quick rundown. You still have your normal timeline here. It's just that it is now representing one of the values in your animation. So to keep it short, the steeper a line is, the faster the animation will go. The flatter it is, the slower the animation. So what I'm going for here is a quick zoom out and then a slow to a really sharp zoom in. And this is usually how normal pop-outs go. So now if we look back at our edit, it's looking a little better now. I'm going to turn on motion blurred, and that's pretty much it for the actual keyframing. Now, obviously, this looks really bland. We don't even have a background set up here, or any drop shadow, or any styles on the actual pop-out, but that's what we're going to be getting into next. So without further ado, let's actually get into spicing up this pop-out. So the first pop-out I'm going to be running you through is a standard drop shadow pop-out. Now, this is commonly used in anybody's montage. Anybody can do it, so it's pretty much the go-to style. So for a drop shadow, it's quite simple. Now, this is a plugin by Video Copilot. If you don't have this plugin, you can always just go to your effects and presets here and search it up, drag and drop it into the clip here. But obviously this is faster, so I'm going to use it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the distance up a little bit, turn the softness up, maybe turn up the opacity. And that's just to add a little bit more pop to the pop out. That's kind of ironic. But when this is added onto a background over here, it looks really nice. One of the most common pop outs you'll actually see. All right, so that's the drop shadow one done. Now we can move on to the stroke style pop out. Now this one is a little bit more rare. You may not see this as commonly as the drop shadow one. one, but it is still a very basic but impactful pop-out style. So let's get right into it. So for this one, I'm going to right click on the clip, I'm going to go to layer styles, and I'm going to go to stroke. Now after this, I'm going to go to these drop downs over here, and I'm just going to change the settings. For me, I'm just going to keep it white. I'm going to keep size to around 12, opacity to 100. Now this looks okay already, but we still want to drop shadow on this. So what we're going to do instead is go to layer styles and add drop shadow. Now the reason why we don't add drop shadow in our effects panel is because this will think that this is actually part of the clip, and we don't want that. So we're going to actually go into layer styles here and use the drop shadow that's provided there. I'm going to put the distance to around 20, size to around 25, turn the opacity all the way up to 100. And that's your second pop-out, a stroke with a drop shadow. And finally, the third and probably the most complicated pop-out out of the three, the saber outline style. Now obviously you will need Video Copilot Saber plugin for this, so assuming that you have that, let's get right into it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select our clip here, and I'm going to go to layer, and I'm going to go to auto trace. Now the reason why we're doing auto trace is because Saber plugin is going to need a mask path to put its saber on, so we're going to auto trace it so that it traces the outer border here. Now we aren't actually going to be using this auto traced mask. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new solid, and I'm going to make this solid a little bit larger than our normal composition. Since mine is 1920 by 1080, I'm going to bring this up to, let's say, 1440. That should be large enough, and I'll explain why later. So now I'm just going to cut the solid down to our pop-out markers, and there we go. Now what we're going to do now is I'm going to press Ctrl C on the mask and Ctrl V on the black solid so that we can move the mask here. And what we can do now is just delete our auto trace layer. So now you can see that our scene is completely black, but don't worry, we will fix that in a second. What we want to do right now is add our Video Copilot Saber plugin, and we're going to go to customize core type, saber to layer masks. And you can already see that we already have this border, and if we scale this down a little bit, you can see that it actually goes all the way around. And this is why we want a black solid that's larger than our composition, so that we have this extra little leeway on the sides. Because if this was in here, the glow would only be on the inside and you'd see some clipping on the outside. So I'm going to bring our scale down back to 100, and what we could do now is parent this to the null. Make sure that your playhead is at the very start of the null, because if you parent it while the scale is at something like 69, it's going to look a little weird. We're going to parent this to the null, and now we should have our pop-out following the null, just like our clip. All that's left to do is go to our toggle switches modes, or click this button at the bottom left, and switch the black solid's blending style from normal to screen. And now you can see that we've got ourselves a pretty nice pop-out. Now of course you can always change this to your preference, so personally I like the fire one, because you know, it's fire. Now you might notice that there is this sort of black border around on the side, but with this next part of the tutorial, we should be able to fix that. And that is adding our background. Now, of course, there are many different background styles to choose from. In fact, you can honestly make your own, but in this tutorial, I'll just be showing you some of the most common ones. And the first background I'll be showing you is a desaturated background layer with some vignette. And so how you do that is I'm going to go to the very start of our marker here, and I'm going to duplicate this clip right here, our actual pop-out. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the parent to none. And as you can see, our black border has changed to an actual background, which is our clip. Now, obviously, this looks a little weird. There's not a lot of change between the pop-out and the actual background. So what we're going to do is put on the Lumetri color plugin. We're going to go to saturation, and we're going to bring it all the way down to 0. I'm going to turn the exposure down to maybe -1.5. If you want to, you can add a little bit of vignette if you want it to be extra dark on the edges. So now you can see that there's a lot of contrast between our background and the pop-out, which is exactly what we want. Alright, so the next background I'll be running you through is the hue shift style. Now, some people like this one, some people don't, but at the end of the day, it's up to you whether you want to use it or not. I'll just be running you through it anyway. Now this time I'm going to be using BCC Hue Sat Lightness, so of course if you don't have the plugin, you should probably get it. And we're going to go to the very start of the clip here, and what we're going to do is go up to our effects controls. We're going to go to hue, click on the timer, make sure that this is at 0. We're going to go to the very end, and I'm going to set this one to 2 rotations. The higher number you choose up here, the faster the hue shift will be. So as you can see here, this hue shift effect just adds this sort of rainbow effect on the sides. After this, I like to add a little bit of vignette just so that this background part isn't too distracting. I might turn down the saturation just a little bit, and that's usually enough to make it look pretty nice. And the last style I'll be showing you is a simple white background with some film grain. This is a really common background you may see a lot of editors use, so it only makes sense to run you through it. So what we're going to do is right click, go to new, go to solid, and I'm just going to bring this down to our normal 1920 by 1080, and we're going to change the color to white. And I'm going to use Control Alt down arrow just to move the layer all the way below our pop out, and I'm going to cut it to size. All I'm going to do for this solid is, once again, add some vignette, and I'm going to bring this down to around -5 and turn the feather all the way up to 100 just so that the vignette spreads out really nicely. Now obviously, if this is still too bright for your taste, you can always just change the color of the white solid. Now although this looks really nice already, it still looks a little bland, so what some editors might do is add film damage just to add some grain and dirt onto it. So what I'm going to do is turn off color, add a couple more scratches, just to make this background a little more interesting, and as you can see, it's looking pretty nice now. And that pretty much wraps up all the backgrounds we've got. Now to be fair, pop-outs aren't the only thing that will amaze people in your montage. There are many other aspects such as VFX, shakes, transitions, the list goes on. So if you want to see pop-outs joining forces with the other montage essentials, click on this video here to see what anyone could do with pop-outs in just a few hours. That's all, happy editing, and goodbye.